what does metal fabrication have in common with HIV research?
Nothing. Really,
Nothing.
nothing. Nothing.
Yeah, same. But somehow you made that pivot from HIV research to metal fabrication. And I honestly don't know how you did it. But welcome to How It's Med, the podcast where we chat with amazing people such as Dr. Nina Vellani. She has done amazing work, such as setting up a lab with the HIV Center for Excellence at St. Paul's Hospital, as well as working to turn a metal fabrication facility to sustain profitability. And then now she supports health tech or early stage startups in a variety of roles. So thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited to chat with you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Thanks, Nina. For the rest of you, Nina and I have known each other for a little while, and it's been awesome working with her. And she has seen Goose pop into the screen multiple times, as he will keep doing. But I guess normally the question that we ask when we have physician founders is like, why do you go into medicine? But I mean, I think that you have a more interesting story to tell as to perhaps why you didn't go into medicine and why you went to research instead.
Well, I wanted to go into veterinary sciences. Actually, I wanted to be a veterinary doctor, and unfortunately, I had to flee my country because of political unrest. So I came, I came into Canada, and I was very happy to be welcomed into the country. Unfortunately, I didn't have the resources to go to med school. I had to work through university. And I did have the grades to go into med school or veterinary medicine, but it's just too bad that I just wasn't available to me because of the funding. So I got a scholarship to go to do my PhD, and that's how I ended up doing my PhD in pathology, in the Faculty of Medicine. So that's great.
Mhm. I guess like vet school, honestly, just thinking of the amazing just diversity of biology that vets have to get used to and learn, like that is absolutely fascinating. So mad respect for vets. But I guess just relating back to that like instance where you had to go for research instead, I know it might be, it might be in the past, but like was that choice that you had to make or a choice that was made for you, perhaps, was that choice to go for research difficult for you? And like, how did you feel about that back then?
Well, I had to be practical. That's because you
Yeah.
come into this country as a refugee or as an immigrant. You're just happy to have any opportunity given to you, and you just
Yeah.
grab it. So that's what happened. I just happened to do well in virology, and immunology was my other passion. Uh, Veterinary sciences would have been my most I was very passionate about them since I was a child.
Mhm.
But it being just two schools in the whole country, there was no way I could have supported myself through that.
Yeah.
So it's just that I got to know the professors at UBC who were teaching virology, and since I had the grades, I was able to get into graduate school through that. And
And
I
not,
enjoyed virology. I did like virology. Yeah.
I mean, you did basically set up a lab that had a lot to do with virology. So I would
Yeah.
assume that you like something to do with virology. But I mean, like, why don't you set the scene for us? Like, not to date you, but like what year was this when you sort of started blending that interest in virology and immunology with a PhD? Because that's extremely relevant to why you ended up doing what you're doing.
So I was late 1980s when I was doing my fourth year microbiology. That was my undergrad. Medical microbiology was my undergrad, and I was like, okay, I took when I started the course in immunology, I really liked it, and then when I did a fourth level virology course, I found it even more interesting. And I kind of found that that was something really unknown about viruses, and I just kept, it was something really important. Um, that we were often infected with viruses. Nobody knew what virology was at that point.
Yeah.
It were all of this HIV coming up, and new viruses coming up, and It was, and herpes was a big thing then. So I specialized in herpes viruses, cytomegalo especially. Yeah.
And then how did you parlay that early research in herpes into, I guess, your initial amazing work with the BC Center of Excellence for HIV and AIDS? Like that's amazing work.
Yeah, that was parallel because when I graduated from my graduate school, HIV was a brand new thing. Was just been discovered. It was seen on electron microscope at that point, and then it started coming up as it was isolated, and I found it very fascinating, and went we had opportunity to open a lab at, like, it wasn't me, but it was a Center for Excellence that opened up at St. Paul's Hospital. They were looking for candidates that would have any pathology, virology background. And since I had a background in cytomegaloviruses and in herpes, a lot of HIV patients would, sometimes have that infection happening, during with the symptoms of AIDS show up. And CMV retinitis was one of them. So with my background, I applied for the position as a research associate and I got it. Uh, and I had a very good supervisor, my boss. She was Dr. Casal, Sharon Casal from Ottawa, and she moved here and selected me to assist her.
Yeah. So you played a pretty fundamental role in terms of getting that started. How long were you in research? Because just looking at where you are now, doing all this work with different early stage startups, that time may have been useful in understanding the research that it takes to bring different innovations to life. But how long were you in that other world that isn't so directly related?
So I was, well, I wasn't, I did my PhD. It took me 6 years to get my PhD.
Hmm.
Because I had to change my project in the middle of it. Um, so 6 years in doing my PhD, and then I had my baby, my first daughter, and then I got into research at that point. So there was another 5 years, so 11 years in pure research, basic sciences. Yeah, it's a long
That's
time.
a
But I learned to grow a lot of many different viruses like herpes, cytomegalo, some fish viruses. I worked with some other viruses, parvoviruses, and then I also worked with HIV. So I knew how to grow viruses. That was my strength.
Yeah. So you told me, but you also told me, I mean, at this point, I could ask you what your favorite virus was, but I think the perhaps more impactful question was you told me a little bit before off the air about your experience working with HIV and how like emotionally harrowing that was for you every day. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we would have a lot of samples coming to the lab, and that would be really it was difficult in the beginning because we had to set boundaries of how these samples have to be
Yeah.
processed and all that. And we often got people in the lab that were not properly trained, and I was the head of the I was basically looking at the head of the lab and making sure that they did their job correctly, and sometimes they would not be very careful about it. We didn't know much about this particular, we, we didn't know what else came with HIV. So I would basically say, do not open tubes or anything on the benches. Everything has to go into the hood. So there was a lot of, by the time I went home, I'd have a headache because I'd hardly be breathing. And then there was only one other person that I knew at the BC disease control who knew how to grow HIV, and she showed me how to grow it on T cells. And I had to grow a whole batch of HIV so that we
Oh
could
boy.
we could use it as control for our experiments.
Yeah.
And and I was the one who was the sacrificial lamb who had to do this. And I kind of it was all done under very controlled environment where you still gotta really be careful how you do it. And one time I remember I was pouring my culture out into it, well, harvesting the virus essentially, and it was at a very high count, and I was pouring the culture to store them, and then suddenly I heard the whole negative pressure in the room go hush. Everything stopped.
Uh,
And though I had goggles on, double gloves, I just, and I was hardly breathing in that room because I was always unconsciously not breathing well. And I kind of just stopped. And I'm glad I wasn't wearing my earphones or anything like that. I could hear the pressures stop. And I just quickly stopped breathing. I peeled off my gloves, put everything, and just walked out of the room through the and then disinfected whatever I needed, washed my hands, all that, and then called the maintenance. They didn't know I was in there, and they had shut down the whole system for maintenance because I was working late, and nobody told me they were going to do that. So, and I was expecting my second baby at that time, so I was even more scared. But I couldn't sleep for 2 weeks, and then I did go for an HIV test and was negative, obviously, because I had taken the right precautions, whatever. So it was all good. It was all good. It was I was just grateful that that nothing went wrong at that point. Yeah.
I'm stressed hearing that story.
Yeah,
Like
it was just the
I feel so
aerosol. It was the
stressed.
aerosol that I was scared of because I was pouring the liquid out. It was a huge
Yeah.
count of viruses. Yeah. So those
Yeah.
things happen, but nobody here wants to hear about it. So you go
That
home with it.
my like just even doing that, like the 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 fundamental nature of your work to developing like combination therapies and mapping genes, like all of that was like depended on like the I guess viral culture that you were doing, but the immense stress of it and not being able to share it, that must have been so hard.
Yeah, there was just no there was people who were dying. It was a death sentence for these people. So it was work that had to be done. So it was like, okay, I told my doctor about the situation. He said, okay, let's just do a test. And he sent me for a test. I didn't want to alert my department too much. I just didn't want to make too much noise, except I did let them, I mean, it wasn't in my department that happened. This kind of, the viral, you grow the HIV virus in a controlled environment, and at the, in a particular basic disease control area, in the hospital VGH, and that's where I was. And I guess it was just a misunderstanding, or I was going to be working there at that hour at 11 o'clock at night. That's the only time I had, that the viruses were ready to be harvested. So, um, it was just a miscommunication, but
Yeah.
yeah, but the virus that I harvested, yeah, it did last a long time for us to do a lot of control studies with.
Yeah. So, I mean, just even looking at the amazing work they did again in like helping develop combination therapies, as well as mapping genes that would allow later on down the line biotech and pharmaceutical companies to develop treatments such as for PrEP, that allow for, I guess, prevention of, or I guess prophylaxis against HIV/AIDS. Like all of that work was contingent on the work that you were doing. So why did you take that pivot out of research? Was it something that you chose to do? Did you always want to focus on the scale up side? Or was there another thing that sparked, I guess, that change?
So basically, I felt that there was no recognition for the work that was being done in the lab. I felt that I was doing the work because I wanted to make a difference, which I was.
Hmm.
And Uh, the combination therapy was really important because, you know, we were doing viral loads, uh, looking at every patient with a viral load. If the viral load went up, uh, it would mean that to switch the combination on that patient. And it wasn't something that we published, or even if it was published, I was not recognized in those publications. Um,
What?
yeah, exactly. I was treated like a technician. Yeah, basically doing my work.
That what? That's wild.
Yeah,
I
it
guess
is.
like
It
what
is.
what was what
It
was the
is.
breaking point? What was the breaking point? Because like I know you might not be comfortable sharing, and it's totally okay if you aren't. But like I understand how that would wear you down in terms of like I went through this for a PhD and I'm doing this fundamental work without this
Yeah.
fundamental work, like nothing else would have been done. I understand if it's a gradual wearing down, but was there like a straw that broke the camel's back? Because I mean,
Yeah.
under all the stress that you're in, like I understand if you just were just like this is enough.
Yeah, there was a time when my boss had to leave because she found there was a glass ceiling for women in my department. And then I was the one who was doing work, got on to doing some of the work that they needed me to do, and I also wanted to work on. I had a methodology that I I I had almost developed in paper on how to detect CMV retinitis in AIDS patients, and I wanted to get that work done. But that I was in the middle of trying to finish off one experiment, and I found out I had a lump in my breast, and I didn't think much about it. But then I got a call from my doctor that it had to be removed. Um, so I said, "Well, I can't right now. I'm just middle of something. I'm waited 2 weeks." For to finish this really important work that I was doing because I was mapping a particular resistant genes um, to a particular drug that it was a cancer drug that was being tested in combination therapy for HIV/AIDS patients, and I got everything done, and then we managed to map. I was blinded by the study, and we managed to map the resistant genes and the results from what I was told was phenomenal when they sold them, and I was really excited. But then I was asked to do another experiment, and at that point, I decided to go and talk to the head of the department because it came straight from the head of the department that this one particular experiment had to be done. And I told the person who came to tell me that I cannot. I will I'm in middle of something, but I'm gonna get back to you. And it didn't go well. And then I went to see the head department to explain the reason why. Um, I went in there and said that, how quickly did you want the other experiment to be done? Because I cannot do it right now. And before I could explain that I would have a lump in my breast and I delayed it and now I need to go and get it out. He just screamed at me really loud.
Oh,
Very loud. I had never been. I have a father who's never screamed at me, and so I had never been treated like that in my life. When with my parents, my mom's strict, but my dad never. So I'd been screamed by a man who was my boss's boss, and uh, I was like, when my boss was gone, so I had to report to him, and I was like, I I just got up. I didn't know what to say. I was kind of in shock because I was just in shock. And when I got out of his office, all the people working in his office had heard the screaming, and they all got up to see what was going on. I was very embarrassed. Uh, I was this research associate working hard, and I knew there was a glass ceiling, but this was just something that was like, and really broke that broke me. Yeah, I went through a nervous breakdown actually. I never told anybody at work. So next day when I was going to work, I told my husband, I cannot go to work. I can't. And he was shocked because he knew how dedicated I was. I said, look, I cannot make a difference there anymore. Um, and I I and I didn't tell him I'd been screened dead because he was like, he's a cardiac patient. He just had a heart attack a year earlier. So I just said, I think it's the pressure of the breast lump and all that. But uh, he had to drive me straight to my doctor, and my doctor had to call work saying that she's not coming back for 2 months. She's going to have to take leave of absence. So my surgery was delayed again because I had to go on antidepressants because I had a breakdown. And then I went through my surgery.
You went through all of this
Yeah.
to well, number one, be so dedicated to your work, but also the
Yeah.
ramifications of work circumstances result in even further delay of something that was like of utter import to you, your health. Like to delay 2 weeks before mapping, like that is dedication.
And I'm really glad I still did what I did. Is I did make a difference in a lot of people's lives. Like perhaps
Yeah.
what I did indirectly, I may have, and I hope I did.
Mhm.
But this was something that the way I was treated, it just opened my eyes that, hey, I have a family. I could be dead tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm trying to treat one kind of disease. I have a disease. I couldn't look after myself. I have children. I don't have a husband who's very well either.
Yeah.
So that was eye-opening for me. So that was when I decided I was just going to take a clean break.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I guess so. You took a clean break, you had your surgery, you were treated with antidepressants. So how did that turn into running a metal fabrication company?
So I did go back to work afterwards for just 2 weeks to
Okay.
catalog everything. I could catalog everything that I had. And I wrote
Yeah.
everything. I completed my work. I was that dedicated person.
Yeah.
And I thanked them for giving me the opportunity to work in the department. And I left. Didn't burn any bridges there. But then I took a break, and 3 months down, my husband said that the money that we'd invested in one of the metal fabrication companies was going under. And apparently I was on the board of that company, and I decided to look up the books, and nobody wanted to, my only choice was to try and turn this around, and otherwise the company would have to declare bankruptcy. So he said, why don't you just take over and see what you can help with there? If you want to do something, because you budget, did budgets for the lab, you did everything. I think you do have a business, you are business savvy. So why don't you do that? And he mentored me, he trained me on accounting, he trained me a lot of things, how to run a company. And they were all men. The reported to me was the opposite. It was like 15 men reporting to me. And I kind of felt odd because they were all so nice. And I did not play that ruthless CEO there. I did not do that. We were a team. I learned a lot from where I was, never to play that. We had diverse people. We had people that were in the minority. And then we also brought in women to work at as well. And I was trying to, introduce a mixed culture there. And we created a very wonderful team there. And I enjoyed working there. And we turned the company around.
Yeah, to turn the company around with no previous background in business was like that. That's a really interesting story. But what I want to dig at as well is like, what were your thoughts going from someone of a research and scientific background to one of more of a managerial and entrepreneurial lean? Because like the main, I guess, concept I'm trying to bring to light here is the often dichotomy upon which research in academic institutions and industry is often placed. So did you feel out of place at all? Like, was it weird to you?
I think the thing is, what what I have to be really appreciative of that because I had a PhD, I had the
Yeah.
discipline of learning new things. And because I helped build the lab, I did the budgeting, create everything like, and also I had to order the order the metal fabrication parts for the Hawkins, from Hawkins for the, for when we are, doing for the laboratory.
Mhm.
They had to be exact. The pressure, everything had to be exact. So I had that experience, when I was having built that lab. So, with all that, and I was doing the budgeting and all that, purchasing and everything. So with all that, it just somehow started to become very natural. And my husband he was a very good teacher. So I learned how to put the accounting systems in place and everything. And the budgets I'd done over there, I somehow, I learned how to do them better this time. uh, and also, go for ISO certification because I had to get this lab certified over there. So I had to do ISO certifications for because we were a precision metal part company, we were a high technology company. So, I had to also treat that company with just as much respect because it depends. Like these parts are used for robotics and for instruments that are really important. So, that respect had to be given to that field as well. So that discipline went with me, except I had to learn the business side of it, which I
Yeah.
loved it. I really enjoyed that side of it and enjoyed working with lovely people.
Mhm. It seems like the operations side of setting up a lab and managing it was actually a bit of a crossover with the work that you ended up doing, at least in part, with the metal fabrication company. So that's certainly a really interesting, I guess, takeaway. But how did you go from metal fabrication to what you do now? Like where was that jump? Because now you had the like lab slash like biology science experience, and then you also had the business skill set and a track record to boot as well, turning a failing company to profitability. So when did you decide to kind of mash those two together into one amazing thing with which you built, I guess, your career, which you're still doing now?
Well, I still miss the science side of things.
Hmm.
And I kind of thought, okay, you know what? I at that time, biotechnology was booming in British Columbia uh, in 1990s. And I kind of felt there was a gap from spin-offs, from startups and getting that business side of things into it. So to basically, look at companies in scientific companies with scientific knowledge as well as the business knowledge to see whether this has a market need or not. And I thought that would be really interesting to amalgamate those two, the science and the business side, to then try and if that's a right fit. So I started to going to brokerage houses and that if you need any assessments to be done on companies, if you're going to be funding them, um, I would like to get a give it a go. And I had other two friends who were also in the same position as I was. They just were not happy where they were working in the lab. They wanted to do something more meaningful in their life. So, I said, I think I can bring the business side to the science. And if you can help me with the writing and reports and all that. And so three of us started a company and we did consulting. And through the consulting, I found that there was also a need for money. These companies some of them were falling through the valley of death. They had the good science. They lacked that business savvy to pivot or to get extra money. They would get some funding, grants, and all that, but then you have to move forward with it. So then we came up with an idea. I had met other friends who wanted to start a venture company called Building Biotech. Uh, and it was a venture company. And so I got some friends interested in investing in that venture. I did, and I was a treasurer and CFO of that company. Uh, and we had one huge, uh, our first win was Espriva Pharmaceuticals, which I intimately knew that company because I knew what it was all about. We had worked on that company prior. And we put together a market assessment, and we thought it was worth it was worth, take funding that company. So we believed in it. Uh, and Richard Glickman was one who approached me at that point. If I could put a team together to do this, do the market assessment, I did. And that was followed by me building a venture company. And we said, they were looking for funding. And we said, hey, you know what? We can put some funding into that. More people came in because I wanted to invest in Espriva. And so through that, we built that venture company. We invested other companies as well. And some of them did fall to the valley of death. Espriva did not. And so we had a huge win there. I did that, but, went into my second, third, fourth venture companies. Yeah. So we've got some we got some unicorns through that,
Mhm.
because I kind of have to look at a particular company and see if it's got something very unique about the company. It's in the frontiers of science. It's got ability to pivot. Does it have, I am a scientist by background, but I also would look at it from a business point of view, whether there is a market for such a technology, and how and also assessing the whole, basically the team and everything, and put it together. And so that's how, yeah, I enjoy that. That's just my passion, is to
Yeah.
help with startups. Yeah.
I can tell that as your passion. You're speaking very passionate about it. And it seems like you got really far with it. But like as you went on, I've had so many questions pop in my head. So I'll ask them to you in kind of a rapid fire succession. You had mentioned earlier on in what you were saying, that you had tried to find, or that you found people in a similar position to you with a background in I guess, biology, life sciences in academic setting who were dissatisfied. Was that common back then?
Yeah. Yeah, it was. And all the people that work in my team were women. It
Mhm.
was only two men, and the four or five of them were women. They were,
And
yeah. Yeah, it was crazy. It was
what
crazy.
what was the dissatisfaction? Like, I mean, I understand the impact that you can make in life sciences is great, because if you create something and it does scale, then you're able to help with the health of millions of people. But what was their dissatisfaction? And was it a shared satisfaction between the whole team?
Yeah, I think we were all very, very passionate about the science, very passionate about
Okay.
moving the startups forward, helping consulting. Um, and we kind of, like, when we were doing the consulting part, I had a lot of women that I still keep in touch with,
Mhm.
who have moved forward in the academia, but working on like the business side of academia. And they found they could not work in the lab because there were women. They just didn't have it. There were just some token women there, and the spots were taken. And those women had to guard the positions because they were only, like, they cannot afford to have another woman come up the ranks. So often we I found positions, which is so unfortunate, that if there are a few token women, they're taken for a long time. So there is a glass ceiling, and they will not. I always see that there's more men than women when it comes to higher positions in the science world, and it's still going on. We are kind of still in an evolutionary process here. I think women are, very, they're they have just a similar dedication as men do. And they're nurturing, they are there. They want the science to do well, and they are there to make a difference.
Mhm.
So I felt these women who had that. They wanted to make a difference, and we all worked very hard. We all came with different strengths. One of them would be an extremely good scientific writer. One of them would be a very good judge of, editing. One would be good at judge of numbers. One would be good at judging, trying to pick up all the scientific papers and go through them. We were going through case histories and everything we needed to for the set. But we were doing work outside the lab, but moving the science forward. That's what we were doing, is moving the science forward.
That makes sense. Um, and I mean, from there, I understand that the meaning that you guys found was in moving the science forward so that it could be deployed in the field, not just in the lab. But
Exactly.
in that, you have to answer the question, what is the valley of death? Because that's what you're trying to traverse, and that's what you've mentioned several times in your previous little spiel.
Yeah, so I find that a lot of times, like, there are companies, they do get the grants, they come out of the space. It's not as bad as it used to be, but it can get there even now, because especially the environment that we are in right now with all the markets all dropping and everything. But basically, they get the grants, they get ahead. Um, Angels put in a lot of risk money in it, and so do early startup ventures as well, putting the money in. Uh, and and then at that point, there's a gap between that and the VC financing, and they need to line themselves up with companies that are going to come and support them on the next round. And there are ways to do that. You have to put you have to coach. Even at these startups, we want to coach the companies. Don't put your values too high, because you don't want to down like a down round. All these things, right? You got to be really careful how you move yourself up, who you surround yourself with, and all that. It's really, really crucial. So, a lot of, I think that the important thing is, we don't just do, um, you know, I, I do invest, we do invest in it, but we also make sure that they're surrounded by directors, by board members who have these strengths that they make them, make that leap and they don't fall to the valley of death. So they have to really line themselves well. So all that really counts. A lot of startups go in there and they have really good technology. Believe me, they do. And you see them fall. And it's really sad to see that fall. And years later, they do come back. They get recycled. But the initial investments last.
I guess my question to tack onto that is you framed this in a financing standpoint. So initially companies get grants when they have good technology, and the problem that you were trying to solve was bridging that valley of death between the initial grants and the venture capital funding.
Yeah.
But behind the scenes, apart from the financing, what needed to be done so that a company could be deemed perhaps moved on from the grants and ready for venture investment?
So you basically have to, you have to make sure they go to the proper route where, they put the friends and family money at risk.
Hmm.
Then they go into the startup ventures, like the VCCs, and then the other startup companies that support you. You also have to make sure you don't invite those ventures who are actually, going to take advantage of you,
Yeah.
like spy you out completely. So I have actually just almost saved one company from getting there. And I've seen some companies go through that. They get so desperate for money that they get bought out by companies that they do take advantage and make them public too early. And then
Hmm.
it's like a pump and dump situation. A lot of that happened
Hmm.
in the past. Uh, and so you want to make sure that you guard them, you mentor them, you make sure that that they invite the directors that are gonna who have done it before, who are serial starters. So money is important, but so are who you surround with. You make sure that what the weak points are. That those directors come in and bring them those with them, the advisors. So all that has to happen. And then basically they all have to, like be working directors in the beginning,
Mhm.
for example, right? And works with the company so the company can support itself. But again, the VCC funding is really important. I know a lot of the angels, like I find that a lot of VCs look down upon angels, and they are really angels. These are the people who support them at the start. They put in the risk money, right? And this is what I think they have to be respected. That's where I come in. I'm an angel investor. I am part of VCCs that I have created. So I kind of feel that, it's risk money. I do my due diligence, and it's still not 100%. But I have a lot of faith in the company, a lot of faith in the team. Uh, lo- you know, and we advise whenever we can. We try and help those companies whenever we can. That's, hey, you know what? I think this is how you should go about it, or that, and we try and hope that the CEO and the executives are coachable. So we also bring in the expertise that way. We bring advice along with the money, and you hope, and there are a lot of, the university, and there has been a lot of other ventures that have come in, and the sort of financing happening to the government, to the federal government, the provincial governments that have come in now and trying to prevent that value of death. And I hope they keep funding it, because that's really an important key step. I mean, we can come in just so far, and it is expensive to move a company forward.
Hmm.
So some of that gap has to be filled in, and non-dilutive funding from the governments.
Mhm. So, from what I'm hearing from you, between the grant funding stage and the venture capital stage is where angels come in to help bridge the valley of death by providing, I guess, support and mentorship, as well as perhaps connections to the people who will help build out the team and help advance the technology and marketability of the company to an extent that it is viable for venture capital funding. But there are no discrete criteria because each company is different.
Yeah, each company is different for sure. And there's some companies that start making revenue very early, and you want to make sure that if that's the route that they're going to take, they can start doing that first. So they're self-sustaining, and then they can build the company, on like, have a pipeline. It's really important to build your pipeline so that when one falls off the table, the second one's on. And I often find that with companies that the first one may not work, or you may have to optimize a particular molecule, so you basically, goes into the back burner. You have the next one to work with. So there has to be a pipeline. You can't be a one product company. There have been one product companies that have been very successful. And a very good example is QLT Pharmaceuticals, the first one. Um, and that one was quite an amazing company. So that was what really brought BC to that's when I think I would say that was the company that introduced BC to biotechnology was QLT. And that was a one product company, but they also had other products in the pipeline as well. But then once you have a better product coming to the market, you better be ready to then have your next product go forward.
So I do want to go back to talk about representation in the startup world because we haven't necessarily talked about that just quite yet. But you mentioned QLT, and I think just that bringing BC onto the map and your knowledge of it. If you could tell us the story of it just really quickly, perhaps like 3 minutes, like that'd be really appreciated because I think illustrating how that turned out successfully could be a good case study for some of the listeners.
Yeah, so QLT was actually founded by my professor, Dr. Julia Levy, and I was in my third year immunology, and she spoke about, last lecture, she spoke about the compound that we're going to be using, to move forward with. And I was totally mesmerized by it. And as soon as it went public, I bought some stock. That was my first investment. And and I made some money. And then followed by INEX, which is the Dr. Cullis's liposome technology, which he gave a lecture on as well in my third year biochemistry. And I was again mesmerized by that. And I'm going, okay, this is something cool. I think there's a future. It was ahead of me. He was ahead of the times, and I said, this has a place somewhere and it will happen. We will one day use liposomes to package, and target. It will be used for its target therapy somehow.
I see it happening everywhere.
Everywhere now, yeah. But that was 40 years ago. 40 years ago, I invested in that in IPO level. Yeah.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah, that tells you my age. And so that was my second investment. So yeah, both of them were winners, and I thought, well, that was my startup. Yeah, that's and those two professors are both amazing, right? They have won awards. They've been globally recognized for the technologies they have, and yeah, it was like for me, it was like I was in love with startups.
Hmm. And how
Oh,
did
but
Kyoto?
indirectly, I wasn't in the lab, but I invested as an investor. That was my exposure.
Totally. But how did you see QLT grow? Because you mentioned that they managed to have several, I guess, candidates in the pipeline. And I just wanted to understand what you saw of that and what your takeaway would be for perhaps some fledgling pharmaceutical companies here in British Columbia or otherwise.
So I guess that some of some of the compounds they had in pipelines did not materialize within QLT, but they were moving them forward. And then there was another company called Vellacor that took over one of the compounds
Okay.
from the pipelines and was able to spin out. And we invested in that compound. I mean, not in that company, Vellacor,
Mhm.
and Dan Wautier was the CEO of Vellacor, and it was an interesting compound. It was a dermatology compound, and yeah, we invested in it. And Dr. Julia Levy was part of that as well. So, and it was a unicorn within 2 years. Our VCC made money on the third VCC made money on it. Yeah, so that was a unicorn. Yeah, and it was a startup. Yeah.
Mhm.
And it was
So
bought
the
out
take,
by Dermira, yeah.
yeah. So the takeaway there is like perhaps some pharmaceutical companies need to have multiple candidates in the pipeline so that they're able to be mobile in terms of how they deploy them or develop them. But
Yeah, yeah, true, very true. You have to have a plan B.
sorry, you said yeah, but so what were you gonna say there? Because I interrupted you rudely.
They do have like the beachhead market, or they do have something they're going forward with first.
Mhm.
And then you have to understand the technology they have. Either that one technology is what they can be applied to several different ways. To that would be their plan with one technology. If it doesn't work in in this field, can it be applied in different fields? Or could it be different compounds or different technologies that can be applied in different fields? So you have to know what plan they have, that they have to be
Yeah,
ready to pivot. Yeah.
that makes sense. And to kind of close off this conversation, we talked a little bit about like how a glass ceiling in research resulted in your departure from that field and also in finding the people who helped spark your career in the startup realm. So, do you find that representation is different, or the issues of representation are different in the startup world, or are there similar issues?
So I think in the startup world, we don't see as many women still. We do see them. And I'm finding that a lot of companies are now starting to, trying to have special funding for women because they want to encourage women to come forward
Mhm.
if they have, because, it, I think women are I found that often when I went into meetings, I found there was way more women. Way more men than women in a meeting or even in an AGM. Or there were way more companies being started by men. Less with women. Uh, and now I'm finding more and more women are coming forward with ideas. And there is also funding available to women. They are put in a special category where they can compete for funding, which I think is good in a way, because, it's not that, they are, they're not competing with men. And there's a majority of them out there. So I think they're trying to level the playing field. Uh, but I think we also have to be open to when we're investing. We're investing in the people, not in the gender.
Mhm.
And we also have to make sure that we are investing in diversity. A company, when it's diverse, the culture is diverse in the company itself. The leader is somebody who encourages that company performs better. There's statistics that tell you that companies with diversity, with gender diversity, with cultural diversity, they perform better,
Mhm.
and they bring every there's a they bring something different to the table, and everybody's heard. They somehow fill the gaps.
Mhm.
So for me, I find that I always am drawn towards companies that are more diverse,
Mhm.
and definitely if it's a woman who's a CEO, it won't deter me from investing.
Mhm. So I think to rephrase what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong. Like for you, having a woman founder doesn't necessarily deter you, but you're still looking for the same, I guess, grit as well as coachability and capabilities, so that the startup can succeed. And what you're hoping
Absolutely.
to do is to ensure that those women who want to be founders have the roads to do so and don't feel discouraged by by a lack of representation so far, so that we don't lose talent in the startup field.
Exactly. We have a lot of talented women as well. I mean, just as many as men's. You know what I mean? The proportionate about.
Mhm.
They're there. They're bright. They're dedicated, and they have a nurturing nature. They honestly are very dedicated. They believe in themselves, and I think they need to be, given a voice. They need to be heard
Mhm.
more. Yeah, that's what I believe, because that's what I had to do. I voiced myself. I
Mhm.
I tried to rise to the occasion whenever I could.
Definitely. And before we head off, I guess, are there any pluggables you'd like to plug? Any websites, any things that you're working on that you'd like to mention?
So I'm right now a director. I hardly take directorships and companies, but I'm a director in a company that's it's called Voxel, and the CEO is a woman, and it's Dr. Carolina Valente, an amazing person. I was totally blown away by her, her passion for what she's doing, and I'm really excited to be a director in that company, and it's nice to see have the company is diverse. We have women in there working as well as we are growing, and we have great advisors and directors. It's a very diverse uh, culture, and I really am excited about it.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I've taken a look at Voxel stuff, and they're certainly very interesting. But thank you for coming on, Nina. I really appreciate it. And you can find out more about How It's Med at howitsmed.com, as well as on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. Till next time.
all right. Thank you.